I'm Elise Spence, and this week we're chatting with Harry, an OT working in paediatrics, who also holds a really interesting role as a pastoral leader within his church community. In this conversation, we explore what happens when you know you're helping people, but you don't yet have the words to put around the things that you do. We talk about all the things that come with being early in your career, thinking about how to navigate all of these things, and how to build your confidence. Now let's get started. Harry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Elise.
Harry, tell me a bit about how you became an OT, because it looks like you've had a bit of an interesting pathway into becoming an OT.
Yeah, so to be honest, I kind of stumbled on it. So when I finished year 12, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. That was like 10 years ago now. And I ended up going to Bible college as like an interim thing and something I was passionate about. And then at the end of that year, I was like, I got to do something. And so I don't know if you remember what those books were when you finished school, but they had like the
The
career,
UAC guide.
yeah, that's the one.
Yep, that was me.
Yeah.
I did the same.
And I just like flipped through until I found one that was like interesting. And I was like, cool, OT has, biology, but it's psychology, all these things mixed together. I was like, that sounds really fun, but it's not quite as intense as like, say, psych. And everyone wanted to be a physio, I wanted to be special. So decided against that. And so I decided to enroll in OT and then got in, which was awesome.
So, and then the Bible college on the side.
So Bible college, that was just 1 year. So it was only a cert for 1 year.
Yep.
But I did that cert for during 2017, I think.
What would the pastoral carey stuff that you would have done through your youth be called?
So I was part of a youth group.
So were you part of the youth group through the church and that sort of thing growing up and then taking lead roles in that? Or what did that look like as you're going through?
So I, like as a young kid, went to a youth group and I had like mentors that were provided through that space. And so then as I grew up and hopefully matured, then I sort of took on some of that mentoring role. We call it like a youth leader. And that was probably a lot of what sparked that, just wanting to support people and just realizing how much need there was, particularly in teenagers, like just navigating puberty and just remembering, like, even for me, like I had a great family, was well supported, had a great community, and just sometimes it sucks. And you just can't get around that. And then just going, okay, cool. Like just being able to talk with people through that and support them through that. And then combine that with, chuck in a few disabilities in there. It's just like your whole world just becomes this explosion of things and feelings and things you can't navigate. And so that definitely motivated a lot of that wanting to pursue OT. Was like, cool, I've seen this in a church space, but also in that professional space outside of that, just going, what kind of support can you provide and how can you do that? So that would have definitely been a motivating factor as going into it.
Yeah. And I wonder what I've seen over the years. When I went into OT, I grew up and I was babysitting and left school and was a nanny and then worked in preschools. Like I loved kids. Kids was my thing. That was what I always did. But what I realized after I was had the practice and was trying to hire, people weren't necessarily, peds wasn't their focus. Like I had heaps of people come for therapy assistant jobs who'd never babysat a kid. Like never. I coached sport my whole way through, and I always find it so, like, that makes sense to me that I'm a peds OT, right? Like my background is kids. That's what I've always done. And similar for you. And then I think so interesting for you to then have to figure out, like, what does that look like within the church role? And I've had a few people I've worked with in this same space. What's my role within this church role versus what's a professional OT role in this? Because I bet right now it feels quite similar.
Depending on the client that you're supporting, it can feel very similar. Like your teenage male client who just doesn't know how to talk to people, has no concept of having a vulnerable conversation with his parents about what's going on, or even like the young adults, like the 18 to 30 sort of space where they're just trying to figure out life and going, how on earth do I load up the washing machine? Just those sorts.
But what a beautiful experience to bring in, because one of the biggest challenges that so many peds therapists have, especially if they haven't had their own kids, is what is a disability related challenge and what is a typical challenge that children and teenagers go through. And you've experienced that, right? And supported, I would say, hundreds of people coming through to be able to go, yeah, this is just a really hard time of life. Like you said, teenagerhood is really tricky, which probably places you in a much better spot to be able to hold conversations with those things, empathize very effectively and not have to sit there and go, well, I don't know, like, is this normal? Is this not normal?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that I quickly became aware of when I started working as an OT, was just going, okay, my experience has positioned me quite well, particularly for that empathy piece and understanding and going, okay, cool, like what actually are the challenges that people face in their everyday sort of life and walk? Like I didn't cover it before, but I took like 7 years, I think, to do my OT degree because I was doing it, but it's not like I'm not a passionate studier. I love to read, I love to learn, but there was something about the uni environment. I was just like, this is
Mhm.
not an enjoyable experience. So it took me a long time to do that. So I just did it part time for ages. But at the same time, I was always doing that sort of pastoral role and supporting people in whatever way I could. And then I worked as like a pseudo support worker for a lot of those years as well. And so just getting that sort of breadth of experience and understanding really where people can sit across the lifespan, particularly in
Yeah.
that 0 to 30 space. It just going in, I was like, oh, actually, I do see at least where you could be and where you
Yeah.
can be, which I think helps navigate some of that.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because then I found coming in, I had some very strong preconceived notions of things, like of how things work and what that looks like. And then getting on the ground and going, oh, what is my professional role here though? Like, I know what kids look like, and I know what this looks like in all these different settings. But I reckon that would have been quite tricky for you. And I know certainly others that I've worked with to define what that role looks like over the previous caring roles or support person roles that we were in, and then going, is this OT? Like, what am I doing that's different to what I was doing before?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the almost like it's almost comical in certain ways where OT's like breadth of scope is ginormous. The whole uni course is kind of like dipping your toes in 500 things and then going, all right, now go explore more, right?
Go forth and conquer. You can do everything.
Yeah, of course. Except for you have zero skills to do so. You just have been told that you can, kind of. And so, yeah, exploring that has been really interesting. And even just coming in with like my like religious background or even just like the way that I was raised and parented and then going, oh, this is entirely different. And I have my perception and I would still think in certain respects it would be a better way of going forward, but just learning how to work with parents and the fact that there's such a different relational dynamic. That's been, yeah, really, really fascinating to see. And yeah, it's been at times difficult to kind of recognize, okay, well, is this vastly different than a conversation I would have outside of this space? No. Is that a bad thing? In some cases, yes. In some cases, actually, no, this is actually exactly what they need. But it does feel odd that now I'm, charging 193.99 per hour to do it.
100%. And I wonder whether it's that sometimes I say it's as you build your confidence in the clinical or professional scope, it's like we put words around the things that we were doing. So now we've got words of like, why was I good with kids? Oh, because I'm really good at therapeutic use of self. Like that's the professional language we'd use in that space. And so I wonder sometimes, and just thinking, you're only a couple of years in, we maybe just haven't got to that piece just yet where you're going, I'm doing this for this reason, and that's why it makes sense. And here's where the evidence sits with that. You're probably just really good clinically, like just really good at therapeutic use of self, and things come really naturally. But then when we add the clinical reasoning behind it, it's like, whoa, oh, that's why that works. It's actually it's a real thing I'm doing.
Hmm. Yeah, and that was part of why I wanted to chat to you today. Just getting some outside sort of scope into what I'm doing, to give a bit of language for it, because I know you've supported a lot of people through similar things. Because like I'll do a lot of things that feel right, feel natural from experience, context that don't necessarily in my head perfectly translate to what would be OT specific evidence or
Yep.
practice or things like that. But then I go, but this is what the client needs, and I talk to other OTs, and they go, yeah, that sounds great. And it's like, well, how actually putting that into evidence-based practice and going, is this what this client needs? How do I recognize that? And I'm fully aware that, being 2 years out, there's still so many things I'm obviously learning, and getting to clinical competence is actually still perhaps a while away. And I might have the clinical skills for being able to put the language to it that gives that clinical confidence. It's definitely something where I'm going, okay, cool. How do I move forward with that? Because, there's lots of people who are supporting across giant lifespan. You got FCAs, pediatrics, adults, mental health, so many things. And then going, okay, cool. I feel like I'm in the right sort of vein with a lot of them, but then having that clinical confidence because I'm sort of aware of that background practice evidence, that's where I'm like, it's really sort of kind of coming to a head where I'm going, I really want this to shift and move, because not feeling confident is really crappy, right?
Totally.
Like,
Yeah. And especially if you've lived a life before this, right? Like you've lived a life where you were good and competent at the things you were doing. So it can feel tricky, and especially tricky if you're 2 years in and going, do I know? And I suspect as we start chatting, you know a lot more than what you do know that you know. And we just haven't frameworked it. Tell me a bit about how you've become the OT that you are today. So did you go straight into the role that you're in now, or what did that sort of progression look like?
So, graduated at a really random time of the year in like April, just because I finished right after my last placement. And then I got a job, I think like a month and a half later, in the practice where I am now. So that was June of 2024 or something like that. It was started out as primarily peds. I started working with like it was like 0 to 18 really, but the under fives, I saw probably 2 or 3. And I was like, no, this isn't for me.
Not for me.
Not for me. It's just, and also I actually really struggled. It probably comes from the church context, but I really struggled working with being given clients that were female because my whole context was all male. And in the church world, it's like, cool, like you don't, like as a guy, you don't talk to girls. Like it's, not in the sense of like the religious sense, but in the protected practice sense of like, as an adult male, you're never alone with a younger female. You don't
So
engage in
many
those
things to navigate.
And then I had one of my first pediatric clients, female. She was talking about her period and her conversation with the boys. And then afterwards, like I rang my boss. I was like, "Am I allowed to have this conversation?"
Yeah. And then they may or may not have had an answer for you, right?
He laughed because he was like, "Oh, fine," because I was the second male OT at the practice. He laughed. He was like, "I finally have someone to laugh about this with because totally you have these conversations, and if you're a GP, you wouldn't blink. It's like, of course you have these conversations, and you can absolutely support them through different things, whether it's the sensory aspects of periods or whether it's navigating the social aspects of relationships. All things you can support with, but because of your context, that whether it feels right, quote unquote, it does feel a bit odd and takes a while just to shift that."
Oh, but it's even bigger than that, right, in peds, because you can even hit this barrier of people don't want you. Like if they've got a female client, they don't want a male therapist. Like we've just navigated this. My daughter's requested to start seeing a female GP because our GP was a male, and she's like, "No, I don't want to talk to him. I don't want that." So it's this whole extra layer that we've got to consider in this onboarding. What sort of professional development stuff have you done?
So most of it was really early. It was like the traffic jam in my brain, that sort of stuff, and a bunch of other
Like
YouTube.
little things, no,
Yeah,
like
lots of
big
little
meaty
things.
stuff. Yeah.
No, the only big meaty thing was I started your Art of Peds one, but again, because I'm part-time, that chewed through the whole PD budget and I have to do that outside of hours of my own time. And so I reckon I'm like 5 to 6 hours through that, just gotten through the frameworks pieces. And
You're on the boringest of all the days as well.
Yes.
So no wonder you're just like, oh, come on.
I know what's important and I want to keep moving forward and getting confident and competent and stuff. But yeah, it's been hard to get some meaty stuff
Traction
in.
going.
And it's also like as everyone's aware, it's so easy to be busy. So you got more clients, like there's a constant wait list. If I wanted to, I could see however many clients I wanted to. And so just realizing how quickly life spins around. Christmas comes, Easter comes.
I think that thinking if you've already for those who don't know, Art of Peds is available as a self-paced option. Took me a long time to offer that because I, like you, don't like self-paced things and I won't progress through them. And when I run it live, I can say to you, hey, this first day is boring as like it's a lot, but the rest of it makes so much more sense. And it can be, like pulling teeth getting through that first day because it's so much context. I would nearly think just thinking that you've got access to that at the moment, I would literally book out a couple of days and get it done. Like what you will get out of it would be so helpful. So whether you could shove it on a Saturday or a Sunday or a half day, but like intentionally block it and get it finished because it's where a lot of this confidence for you will come. So much of what's in there, you'll be able to go, yes, this is oh my God, this is what we do. This is how I work. This is everything that I offer. But I've not had the language before. So if you've already got access to it, I would say just try and prioritize bumping it through. You will find the next 3 days much more interesting and you'll be able to zoom through them a lot quicker. But yeah, I have a few that do it self-paced and I'm like, oh, probably not the best pathway for you to do it. They're like, oh, I'm up to day 3. I'm like, yeah, you bought it 6 months ago. Like you need the whole context because it wraps it all together. But that would be something helpful to think about. So tell me about the part-time. So, and are you an employee or are you a contractor? What does that?
Employee at both my workplaces.
And so 3 days, both weeks?
Yep. So 3 days at both places. So for church, it's Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then for OT, Monday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah, interesting. And what do you do? Like, are you seeing all your clients regular? Like, have you got them in fortnightly, weekly, or is it ad hoc? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so most of my caseload is fortnightly for a client. So Mondays and Thursdays are the client heavy days. And so that's mostly pediatrics with the 2 adults thrown in there. And then Fridays are generally report writing or functional day. So FCA every 3 or so weeks. And then the rest is all report writing for either the FCA or any other things. Yeah.
And then, so are you big days? Like, are they 5 a day, 6 6 a day? Like, what's your
No, so most like 5 a day is probably max what I'll do.
cool.
Based
Yep.
just like there were times when I first started and when I was full time as well, because I initially started full time. I could fit heaps more in, but I realized pretty quickly going to part time that like anything that
Oh,
goes wrong,
so
you're
hard.
just for lack of a better word, I was like, I'm just cooked.
Yeah,
Like I've got
100%.
families that are like, oh, I need this by this date. I'm like, well,
Yep.
I can't. I'm actually fully booked from now till forever. So just taking like I think now I only have one day where I see 5 clients. The rest is all four because otherwise like and the way that they set up our billables for travel and stuff, it's like four with notes
Travel.
is
Yeah, so that's
enough,
fine. Yep.
but it also gives space for all the reports and things that just appear
Mhm.
or all the clients I've had in the last month that have just had reviews conducted on their behalf and it's like cool they're
Yeah.
losing their funding, you need a report, whatever it is.
Have you done or seen my client snapshot tool?
I think I've heard you talk about it and went, that was really interesting, I should go follow up on that.
I think it would be a good idea. So dumping it down. So a few reasons why it would be helpful. One, it's handy, especially when you're like split between two roles, to be able to just go, who have I got? Where are they up to? What's going on? So you're not having, especially because your other role is still very dense with names and people and things and like all of the stuff. How do you go? Like, can you hold it all now, or are you still dropping bits and pieces?
I mean, names I'm pretty good at because I think there's a practice you just have to get
Yep.
good at. But yeah, the little bits in the admin pieces that just slip through,
Mm.
like, oh, that's right, I was going to follow up on that particular
Yep.
piece of AT for that client for that thing. Rah, rah, rah. When was that?
Yeah, totally. So I think you could do this client snapshot tool. So that it would be helpful to do this in the short term anyway. Again, once you work your way through RDPs, it'll give you heaps more context. But essentially, you pop all your clients down. You are documenting diagnosis, team, who else is around them, what's going on. There's a section then that you add in like NDIS funding, where are they up to, when's their plan due, all of those things. Because when we're not got that super clear, right, we get all these surprises like, oh my gosh, you're 6 and get, like we're just not across the caseload, and you probably are, but it's sitting heavily in your mind. So this just helps to get it out of your head and down somewhere. But the important part, the helpful bit that comes in after that, we can pop in school, year, parents, jobs, all the stuff that we forget that is actually really important for relationship, which I know you would be heavily valuing. The next part of it though talks about their individual differences. And this is the part that is the game changer in the pediatric space and I think it's the piece that'll help you to make sense of the work that you're doing, because you know how to work with them already, but you don't know why you've picked what you're doing, right? So the individual differences is like, yeah, that kid super anxious, has some emotional regulation difficulties, also has some sensory differences, like, but you're listing that. So your clinical reasoning is already coming there to be like, this is what's going on. And I've intentionally picked this approach. But the other helpful part is, what's my intention for this 3 months? So where am I going to for this 3 months with this family, with these kids? So when you've got like random stuff coming up, like, hey, they want a functional, you can be like, cool, that's our focus for this 3 months. Then how do we get all this sorted? Let's shuffle all of the scheduled things that we had for you to make sure that I can get that moving. Does that sound like that would be helpful? Like the 3 month piece definitely is handy for nearly all therapists, just to contain and go, okay, let's just think for the quarter that's in front of us, what is our focus and what are we doing?
Yeah, I think a lot of that information just kept on like our client profiles and stuff, which is helpful. But that the individual differences and the 3 month sort of snapshot probably helps refine all the stuff when you're setting yearly goals and things like that, just
Yep.
to go, this is what we're aiming for in this time.
Yep, absolutely. And the 3 month piece then leads it to contracting, right? So this is maybe where it would be different to the church work, because you probably don't really need to say out loud what we're doing and why we're doing it. You just, the expectation is you just work with them and off we go. But here, another big piece of the puzzle that makes the work we do much more intentional and meaningful is to say, you've said this, here's what's going on, so here's what I'm going to do, and this is why. Are you on board with it? And I think even adding that piece, that little step in there for you, would help you feel so much more comfy, because you know what you're doing, you know why you're doing it, but we've not put in that stop point to have that conversation with the family just yet, which means that you're doing all this amazing stuff, but they don't know what you're doing and why you're doing it, but it just puts language around what you're choosing to do.
Talk to me more about that because I'm hearing, I'm understanding, and I want to understand more.
Yeah, it's like, it's one of my most favorite things, right? So a really good example would be when I was trained, I just ran floor time sessions. So I was trained in floor time. The families would come to the clinic and we'd be like, hey, so we're going to play with your kid on the floor. But I didn't do, so floor time is this model. The goals that you've set looks like this. And the floor time approach works like this. And I'm going to be on the floor. And then sometimes you might have to come in and be on the floor. Are you okay with that? So I distinctly remember this session with a parent where I was like, okay, now I want you to go be on the floor. And I watched her And I remember even like talking to her about the model and her being like, I don't care. Like these are not values of mine. Like the thing that you're talking to me about. And I, at that point, being a baby therapist, was like, oh, she's not following what I've said. Rather than this model isn't the right model for this family. Like this is not the appropriate. She's not keen. She doesn't this. That's not going to be where they're at. So I never out loud put the cards on the table to say pros and cons of this approach, or even here's how I work. So in this practice, this is the way that we work with that type of client. Would you like that or not? We just go, we assume because you're here, let's just get going. And so what can happen in that space is you have a lot of bump back, like say a floor time where we're doing more follow the child's lead approach. The parents might be like, when do you start work? Like, when are you actually going to sit them down and make them do work at the table? Oh, yeah, true, because I never actually had that conversation out loud with you. I never said pros and cons of this model. You've chosen this model. Think about all of our neuroaffirming stuff at the moment. Like, if we're not saying, hey, this is how I work, and when you come to this practice, this is how I will work with you, then we've done no favors for anybody because we haven't said those things out loud.
And it's an interesting thing. And I think the more I've probably listened to even you, Sarah and Nikki, talk about how you guys operate in your practice, I think that the practice that I'm in, a lot of that stuff, that almost like just that professional piece, it's like it trickles down from top down, right? And this is not at all a critique of my management, because they're phenomenal individuals, and all of them will gladly say that they didn't have the supervision that they wish they had. And so then, by desire or not, what they've perpetuated is, this is how I was taught, I think this will work for you. And then some of that professional piece of just being like, okay, cool, how do you have an initial conversation with the family around these are the actual type of supports we can provide your child, these are the models, this is the theory and framework. Like, it doesn't have to be that explicit, but actually even providing that level of conversation was never even something that was breached as breached. You get the idea. With me as a new grad, it was just, go do it.
But this is not an uncommon thing, right? Like, this is such a common experience. And in one of the pods that I recorded last week, we were saying it's that piece of like, I had amazing therapists. In my first practice, I had like two really, really just incredible therapists to look up to. We were all learning from them. And so it's really hard to not have that amazing person and to go, that's what good looks like. Like, that's what an amazing therapist looks like, right? How do they navigate these tricky conversations? And I've had to teach myself all of these things over time. So I've just tried to framework it for other people. So I'm in the middle of writing a presentation for next week, which is all about service evaluation, because again, no one explicitly says that stuff out loud. Like, I might have a tricky session and I know how to hold space for that. Most other therapists are like, well, that was a lot. Oh my gosh, let's go into boom, 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 boom. As we get more experience, we're like, well, hang on, let's just wait and see. Like, yeah, that was hard. Let's wait for that next week. But what happens when we're not intentional about teaching this? You guys don't hear it. And then so it's not a thing, right? Like, we know it's a thing, but no one tells us explicitly why we do what we do. And this is why, like, as you push through Art of Peds, a lot of this concept is in there as well. So you'll hear a lot of that. But that intentionality gets lost because they weren't in a space where they learnt to be intentional either. So they're doing therapy and they're doing goal setting and intervention. But even when you were saying about the PD options that you've been to, and again, this is a really common thing that I'm seeing with many practices, they're not going to big PDs. Like, I've been to nearly every one of those IMI workshops. They're 2-day workshops. Like, every time I have people now do like my little baby handwriting course on Verve and be like, you didn't cover. I'm like, it was an hour and a half. I have like probably spent 50 hours learning this stuff. Like, but people don't realize, and you would know this, right, from the other work that you do. It just takes time to learn stuff, but you have to go and learn those things. But it's really tricky to know what to learn. So that's the bit that I think you've not necessarily had that guidance of, here's the way we as a practice typically approach this type of client.
Yeah. And I think that really describes it, where it's a very independent model because, everyone's mobile. And so it's like, cool, whatever you need, you learn. And it's like, cool, but I don't actually know what I necessarily need. And how am I supposed to know that? Like, there's an element of, sometimes that really frustrates me in the sense of when you ask a question and then you get the question back. Like, and in a lot of situations, getting an opportunity to work through your clinical reason is a really helpful thing. But then at times I go, okay, the difference between supervision and training is like, actually, I probably just need to be told what to do, because 100%. I don't have a framework from which to operate that actually will land this client in a good result. And you go,
absolutely.
Whoops. I didn't know. And I couldn't have known.
Absolutely. And I think that this is the challenge that we have. I was chatting with a practice about this earlier this week, where you might be accessing supervision and that's really great and lovely. That's not teaching and that's not training. So that again is hard. And that's just a reality of the work that we do. But I wonder for you, let's think about how we could the most of the advantages and opportunities that are available to us. That 3-month plan, super helpful to take into supervision. So your question is, what would you do for the next 3 months with this client? Not tell me the answer for this one problem I've got in front of me, but tell me with this client that I've brought to you, what would you be thinking this would look like? And what would you think? And what model are you pulling from when you say that? And then they're like, I don't know. And you're like, okay, no worries. But where are we going to with that? So that 3-month piece, I think, is really helpful when you're, especially like think the adults, right? Like when you're going into that space and you're like, oh, I've no concept. I don't know what this should look like. But when you ask that, they just give you a like next session, do this. And you're like, cool. And then like, what are we doing now? So I really like that 3-month piece where you can go, what would this look like? Now, the other part that I know, and I used to be very guilty of this as a supervisor, sometimes I'm not giving you context. So if you ask a question and I just reflect things back to you, what can happen is that I miss, but tell me why you're asking me that question. Hang on, let's unpack this a little bit further. And sometimes we see that in supervision where they aren't trying to build your skills. They're just coming now. They're like, oh, well, you're pretty experienced. Let's just reflect. You're like, I don't need it reflected back. I have questions and I need guidance, but that might be what you need to take into supervision. So you might need to come in and say, for this specific thing, I actually just need you to tell me what you think I should do. I don't want you to reflect it back to me. I'm not lost. I don't know. Where other times when you're like, I'm just wondering, I'm bringing this thing to you. For supervisors, I typically say like, it would be nice to say, what do you need from me for this situation? Do you need me to tell you what to do? Or do you want to just hash it out and talk it through? What would you prefer from me in this scenario?
Yeah, I think I probably haven't really just had the confidence to state that sometimes. Because I think I've sort of dabbled my toes in like, hey, can you just like sort of tell me what to do here? But just that confidence and clarity and being like, hey, this is the situation and I actually just need to know what you would do in the situation. Probably really helpful, just language to go framework, this is what I need from you. And if they don't necessarily have the language to do that for me, then I'll go, this is what I'm requiring.
Yeah. And I bet they would assume you have the confidence to do these things because you look like a confident person and you present like a confident person, right? So I think sometimes that can be a challenge when we present well, that if you're finding things tricky, they're like, no, you've got this. Like, come on, mate. You know how to, there's that challenge where they don't think you would find it hard to ask. And I would say just ask. Like, there's no problem in asking. And probably with where you're at and what you're doing at the moment, and you ask and they can't answer, they might pay for you to go get that information from somebody else. Like, that's sometimes what will happen is I assume you're going really well. So wouldn't you flag it with me if you weren't? And you're not flagging it with them. So then they're like, he's killing it. Everything's amazing.
Yeah, I don't know. Even insecurity, or what do you call it? The imposter syndrome is what people call it.
Yeah.
Which, when you're new, like, of course, you're going to feel like you legitimately don't know anything. Uni teaches you literally jack. And so just that piece of just kind of like, cool, like, I actually impose pressure on myself and what I'm supposed to know. And if no one asks you that question, then it's like, well, am I supposed to? Am I supposed to be totally competent and confident and all of these things, and also have had zero training or PD in this? Where did this magically arrive from? Experience. You learn it as you go. Wonderful.
Yeah. And because they've done that right, that's how they've taught. So they're not going to be thinking anything different to that. Let's have a little bit of a think about how you do learn best, because possibly that, considering, that uni took a little while, what would you say, like, what type of learner are you? Like, I would imagine a pretty hands-on learner, like you need to be in and it's very pragmatic. Like when things make sense, it's good to go and it sticks and that sort of thing, where uni is very theory heavy and that maybe didn't stick as easily.
Yeah, like nail on the head, pragmatic, hands-on, give me an opportunity to see it in action and work, and I go bang, like that. It's solid, it's unlocked, it makes sense, which requires observing someone and seeing it happen, and then doing it yourself, and then getting feedback and going, cool.
But that maybe, again, we haven't been intentional for asking that. But again, like, this is difficult because you don't know what would be best to get help with. But I would be thinking, okay, like if we were chatting through in supervision, you're like, all right, I'm just really stumped with this person. Because for some people, they benefit from me coming to your session or you coming to my session. You and I are probably quite similar. I like watching other people do things like that. I like watching how they word things. I like watching how they move their body, and then I can come back and piece it together to make sense of. For other therapists, they hate that. They sit there the whole time being like, oh, that's so good. I'd never do do it like that. And so they get nothing beneficial out of that exposure experience. So if you're thinking about that, it's probably relatively easy to be like, hey, school holidays are coming up. Can I just take like 2 clients and just come and watch? Have you got kids like this? I want to see how you navigate that. But again, it's that I can see why you would not, if that opportunity is not being said, or there's no intention of like, what area do you want to grow in at the moment? But again, it sounds like if you brought it, they wouldn't say no.
Oh, 100%. And that's where it's like, cool. The team are phenomenal in terms of they want to support. It's
Yeah.
probably more just that
How?
the how and the framework to do that in an effective
Yep.
manner. And so yeah, exactly why I wanted to chat to you today, just going, okay, where do I actually go from here? Because I
Yep.
have thoughts. Is that the
Yeah.
best way?
Yeah. So coming back to that client snapshot, what I would generally suggest for you to do, go and dump all your caseload into there. And it might take a little while, and it might be something you do in your own time just to help consolidate and get things going. If you have work time to do it, of course, but we're thinking now this is just like professional. I want to be confident. So let's spend the time doing it. So it's got in there then the goal. So then you pop the goals in. Don't worry about whether they're good goals or bad goals. Just chuck the goal that you think you're working towards in there. And then the next column is, what is my approach? What am I doing? And this is the bit I think you'll need some support around the language of what you're doing, because you know probably what you're doing. So some language that we can use in this space is top down versus bottom up. So am I taking a top-down approach with this, or am I taking a bottom-up approach at a bare minimum? Like, that's really easy. And again, like, you're nodding along. I think once you start doing this, you'll be like, oh, I actually know more than I thought I knew. And it's because, again, we don't typically have time to consolidate our information. And as we start doing that, you'll go, oh yeah, no, I'm doing that already with that person. I just didn't say that's what I was doing, or I hadn't been clear in my mind what I was doing with that. So from there, once you've sort of done that for your caseload, you flag the ones that you're genuinely lost with. Like, you highlight and you go, these ones, I have no idea what I'm doing. That's what you then go, can I come and watch a client like that? Or can someone come into my session for that?
Yeah, it's a good plan, because it takes it out of the ether of all of the things and all of the stuff. And it's like, actually, well, the reality is a lot of the time things are generally making sense if you spend the time to reflect on it. But those ones where you're just like, oh, okay, that kid, I genuinely don't know what to do for them.
You will find as you get through Art of Peds, because there's such like there's a few case studies in there, I think you'll find more confidence with the work that you're doing at the moment, or at least the language of what you don't know. And in that, it also talks about different professional development options, and that's, you're just not up to that part of it just yet, which gives resources and things for all of those. So that, I think, honestly, a lot of people, especially where you're sitting in that, like, I'm doing good work, but I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. Art of Peds is such a good fit, because you half know everything, and then it's like, oh, it's that, or it's half of this model over here. I need to go do more training in that thing. So I think, again, I would still prioritize that if you could. I think that would be really helpful for you as well. Tell me about some of the strengths in the work that you're doing. Like, what are you really good at?
I mean, just based on me being me, I'm like, the connection to people, and particularly like that teenage male sort of, just type of client who doesn't want to be involved in therapy.
Cool.
Just being able to connect with them has been, I think, just based on experience, been easy, and that forming that therapeutic relationship has just been something that I know I'm good at. And then same thing with the parent communication, just making sure that they're like, even just in sessions, just making sure that they actually understand that they're also part of this process and valued and all that sort of stuff. I think just by nature, that's something like a strength of mine.
Did you see in Art of Peds when we did the models, I don't know whether you might not be up to it yet, the models of like the teenager, the school age service, and the early intervention models?
I think we literally just got to that.
Okay, so that might be good for you to have a bit of a quick squiz at, to help, again, just put words around the ways that you show up differently for people at different stages. So it might help you to be comfortable with that teenager approach where I'm imagining you're probably really good at getting that kid on board, getting him to set a goal and working towards some really functional goals, which is amazing and really cool. But sometimes, because then you've got your younger caseload, you're like, well, where's the parent education, and where's this, how am I covering all these other things? And those frameworks help you to be like, well, like, that's not the priority focus with a teen. Like, with a teen, it's sense of self and building their skills and independence up as best as you can. And in those other frameworks, it's a bit more parent heavy. So I wonder whether that might be helpful just to have a bit of a squiz at as well, just to, even like on that client snapshot thing, to come in and go, which one of these models am I sitting in? Like, is it early intervention? Is it more goal directed, or am I up at that sort of self-directed piece with the teenagers?
Funny, because as you say that, I don't think I've consciously flagged that thought before, but I have absolutely thought that, but then not had the time to reflect on it, where you're like, oh, where does it all of this fit into it? But it's like, actually, if you think about it, that is the thing that makes the most sense for that model, that teenager, what is actually required for them.
Absolutely. And this is where I can see that you would be really good at doing this stuff. but again, not contracting and saying it out loud. So does that make sense? So think about the families that you've got coming through, because the teenagers that we've got, particularly in the NDIS world, maybe the parents also don't know that the model shifts a little bit. So this, I bet, still coming to you with like quite tricky goals, like handwriting and participation and emotional regulation, like, and expecting it to look the same as it did when they were 10, and expecting therapy, not knowing that there is sort of a therapy trajectory or a therapy journey. And so you may have come across like a bit of a bumpy engagement when you've connected super well to the teen and you're like getting in there and getting them totally on board, but the parents like got this ulterior, I just want you to work on handwriting, or I just want you to do this, and then not being able to lean into that conversation well to go, yeah, get it. However, this is what we're going to be doing over here.
I just want to work on his behavior.
Yeah. And again, that's where your experience in your other life is going, yeah, like this age is hard.
Yeah, it's like, it's puberty. Like, as a regular teenager, a regular neurotypical teenager, it's like, I was still a handful for my parents.
Yep.
I can only imagine what this would look like for you. Like,
yeah, yep, absolutely. I wonder what sort of bigger PD. So we've got RTPs, but what else have you thought about doing? Because being interested in that teenager space is super cool, and there are some cool like trainings out there. What sort of things have you done?
Well, the things that I've looked at a million things, but being able to choose one. Again, part of why I want to chat to you today, just going like long term, there's absolutely things that I want to invest into, but there's also like the model of our practice and the way that things are shifting with, say, potential of thriving kids and stuff. It's like, cool, is actually long-term pediatrics, is that actually the thing that I want to actually focus on, because of like, cool, there's AT, there's home mods, there's all sort of stuff, which, or even just, probably 40-50% of my caseload is actually writing functionals, just da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's
do you like it?
I really do. I like when you finish the report and it's like, I feel like it feels a bit like my hospital placements where you see them, you do the thing, write it, it's done. And there's a bit more of that clinical
clarity.
Clarity. Which, having a bit more clinical confidence in your pediatric caseload in a 3-month snapshot will probably help to bring some of that. But I do like that sense of it's almost like a job well done, and then it's
but maybe you will find that same sense of satisfaction in AT world. Like maybe, see, I don't think I would. I like the work that I like doing is the therapy work. It's the ongoing and the problem solving. But I do wonder the AT piece, especially given that you've got the dual roles, you're getting all that you're pretty much doing therapy work in your other life, right? Like, so you're sort of like doing the same thing just with different intents, where if the OT piece was not exactly the same, you might find it's more sustainable. The role definition is a lot clearer. It just depends. I would wonder, like, I thought I'd really like home mods. I was either going to do peds or home mods, which seems like a very different thing, but quite explicit, right? Like you just come in, you problem solve, you fix it. So thinking about like coming back to that learning profile for you and going, are you someone who likes to master things? And then, home mods might be a good fit where you go, actually, I love this problem solving. It's a black and white answer to things. That piece would be much nicer than the work that we do at the moment. And being able to come in and go, yep, I know the paradigm I work in. I come and I do my work, I make the recommendations, and I get enough satisfaction out of that fulfills me for my clinical role.
Yeah. And again, hence driving like wanting to talk to you today is like, there's so many things that you can choose to. I love working with people, hence the jobs that I have. And yet you get to that point where you're like, okay, I want to specialize or at least get a pseudo mastery in what area.
Agreed. Because like it would be really nice for you to feel confident with the work that you've been doing here before we go into something else. But then when we shift into something else, to be really intentional about how you would build your skills in that. In saying that, like again, those other areas probably a little bit, it's rude to say easier to master, but there's clearer competencies to master compared to the breadth of pediatric work that there is. So if you think, like I know Nikki was presenting about her capability, her capacity framework, it's amazing. It's so beautiful. And it's like, you do this 3 times, do this 3 times, do this. I'm like, oh, that would be so lovely. Our work's not, is so all over the shop that you really, like, even when I've tried to frame it, it's quite tricky to do. So I think knowing that you would, honestly, you would thrive in anything. Someone with a curious mind who is going to self-pace and teach themselves what to do is going to thrive in any role, but it's more about what would bring you joy and what you would find interesting enough to keep your interest, especially if the intention is to keep it like part as well. The other bit to think about, like, I know, are you thinking in the future about babies and kids and things like that? Because that's the other interesting part in the pediatric world that a lot of therapists find having little people and servicing little people at the same time is quite a challenge. So just knowing that that other role already holds a lot of that maybe the OT role, maybe that's, we don't need an extra additional stress, like maybe we want something that is quite different so it is clear cut and it doesn't follow you home.
Yeah, and there's all thoughts that I've had where it's like, cool, like me and my wife are currently building a home, and so it's like once that's done, then we're thinking about kids and all the rest of it. It's like, okay, when that happens, am I going to want to shift?
Yep.
Probably,
Yep.
Just based on reality and already
Yep.
having a bunch of people things in my other job. And then going, okay, well then if that is the shift, then what do I shift into?
Yep.
And also, am I going to do it at the practice that I'm at? And while I'm waiting, do I specialize or improve in pediatrics? I always want to improve, but what do you invest your time in?
Yep, agreed. It's so tricky to do any of this big picture planning at the moment with all the changes. In saying that, your caseload's not going to be touched for a little while, right? Like most of them, if they're older than 8, we've got a chunk of time. So you could say you sort of got 2 years up your sleeve potentially before things will start changing significantly. I think one of the challenges that we have, and this is probably like a reflection of you coming through from the church piece as well, and I talk to a lot of therapists about this, that then we maybe don't think about other places as opportunities because that's the place I do the thing at. That's my work venue. Church is the way you do your church. Does that make sense? Like where many other people do not think like that and they jump through jobs very, very, very quickly. But for me, I was always quite intentional about where I would pick for that next growth opportunity. So I don't know that I'd stay where you are if I wanted to grow into something else. I'd stay there to consolidate your ped stuff. Like I wouldn't be going to find somewhere else for the pediatric piece because just some support around that supervision piece will tidy everything up for you quite nicely here. But looking at my next career step, it's just nice to go, let's try something different. And sometimes that can feel really scary because we don't know what else is out there and we don't know what that looks like. But I worry that for a lot of us, it's like, is this what I'm doing forever? You're at the start of your career. Like we've got years and years and years in this space, right? Like the world should be our oyster and we should be able to go. And because you're in absolutely no rush, we can just wait. And something really cool might come up and you go, that's what I'm going to go do. And then we go then, because there's no pressure for you to do this just yet. Like it's a lovely workplace. You just need, some tweaking of what we're doing here. It's not like, I'm thinking we should probably jump now. Like that's not the case at all. You're quite happy and things are going fine. But yeah, we have a whole career ahead of us and it's exciting, sometimes overwhelming to think about all those things. But literally you could just keep an eye on what comes up and just when something takes your interest, go, maybe that's my next challenge.
Yeah, it's funny the different approach that, the context that I come from brings to how you approach like a workplace. I'm like, I assume, and also part of how I was raised, where it's like, oh, if you work, you stay there. Like every job I've had, I've been there for 5 or 6 years. And so it's wild to me that me being at where I work now for over 2 years is like a length of stay.
Perceived as long.
And admittedly, though, they've got great staff retention, and I'm not the only person that's been there for that long. There's many that have been there for 5 to 7 years or whatever it is. But yeah, it's fascinating that just the different approach. And I'm aware of the then perhaps limiting factor of I have this perceived owing of I need to work with you guys and do all the other things. And there is also the piece of like they are very incredibly well intentioned. And if I brought XYZ with some clarity to them, I actually think they would take it on board.
100%.
And there's a few OTs that do home mods and do that AT stuff. And it's like, cool, then I could potentially explore it with them.
Yeah, I was really similar. And just as I've like met more people that have been out for as long as I've been out. So I had 3 different jobs. I was at most for like 2.5 years-ish and then had my own practice. But I get bored of things quite quickly. So like 2 years is about my max, right? Like once I'm going, oh, yep, I've mastered this. I want to progress onto something else. And it took me a while to learn that about myself. And because now I've seen other people who've moved more rapidly, I'm like, how have you had 10 jobs? Like we've been out of practice, one of my colleagues, she has been, she's overseas. She's legit. So she's been over there for 10 years. She's had 10 different jobs in that time, but like no yuckiness about that. No, like jumping, just that's how their system works. And they pull her and put her into these different roles. I'm like, my gosh, your actual career experience is so interesting. And the work we do can get to that point where it is relatively repetitive and you're not feeling like you've got growth. You've still got a chunk of growth in this space. We are not at a mastered piece just yet. Like, it would be super lovely to get. And for me, it took at least 5 years to get to a point where I was like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I'm super comfy with what I'm doing and I'm ready to train people and do these other things. So there's still definitely space there, but the world is your oyster. But I know that feels like a lot, but genuinely, I would just keep an eye on Seek and just be like, oh, that looks interesting. I'll just keep a note of like what sounded interesting there. That one sounded cool. And then making that decision to leave a workplace, I can't say I'm good at that. I always found that really difficult, but it's a career step rather than I'm leaving this workplace because it's a beautiful workplace. It's not something that we needed to get out of quickly. So it really all makes sense when you're like, I'm just ready to grow. I'm just ready to do that next thing, which you're not just yet at right now.
Would you like part of my thoughts in chatting with you today is like I think that the place where I work is really well positioned to be like, you know, excellent, amazing, even if right now they're just kind of great, like, and I mean that very genuinely, but you know, I'm only there for 2 years. I don't have a whole lot of sway. Like, management will listen to me because they're respectful and wonderful and kind. I guess I'm probably just talking out loud as much as I'm asking questions where it's going. Like, I wonder if there's an opportunity to actually have the input to actually kind of
I
help
think a lot
shift
of
things.
people wonder that. So maybe again, you wonder it, but there's a contained period of time around how long we continue wondering that. So absolutely. And in some scenarios, you can come through and you can be the change. Like, it can be amazing and they'll hear it, and like that absolutely can happen. Often it doesn't. And then you're there going, I've told them and I've asked them and this hasn't happened. This doesn't sound like your space. It sounds like it would be relatively well received and some guidance would be super lovely. But again, that little containment, or sometimes having an external person to check in with, can be really helpful. Like, we used to do in our practice a professional development plan, and I think this would be handy for you. So we had an intentional plan for the next 12 months. Those clinical areas were like, these areas are what you're finding tricky. How are we going to build that up? Oh, you want to learn how to supervise? Let's build that up. Oh, you want to, you know, explore home mods? Let's have a chat about whether that's appropriate just yet or not. So that might be the other thing just for you, and maybe for you and your wife, to check in and go like, how am I feeling? Do I feel like I'm still growing here? Maybe it's when you hit that piece where you're like, I'm not growing at all. Like, I'm just doing stuff. And I think you're somebody who likes to keep growing. So maybe that's when you hit that wall and you're like, yep, cool. I've fed everything up and there's opportunity for me to grow, or now that's not here. And I am no longer getting the growth or job satisfaction that I enjoyed before.
Yeah, that's fair. Probably a good way of thinking about it, because it's just there's always opportunity. And I'm sure, yeah, like you said, I'm not the first person to be like, I can be the change. And as I said out loud, it sounds hilariously comical / stupid, but also, you know, I've heard that story before where it's like, you'll be the change, and it's like, well, a couple of years in and you're like, well, probably not actually.
Yeah. And like, it's just being mindful of that. Like, it's never saying no. It, like, all of this stuff is, the more information I have, the more of an informed choice I can make. As long as you're making an informed choice going, I'm choosing to stay to see what this looks like, and they are being responsive. Where I see it not happen like that is where it's not an intentional choice and we're doing it and we're just hoping things will get better, but I'm making no headway into that, and I haven't worked my way into a position where I can give feedback, you know, like all of that sort of stuff. So as long as you're being intentional, just everything. Intention is my word of the year, but being intentional with my career and my development, the clinical work that I do, and then ensuring that intention aligns with the opportunities that are available.
Yeah. Did you find that the workplaces you were at, you felt responsible for beyond just your role, like just how
100%. Yeah. That's why we're like talking to each other, really. And that's why people like us are inclined to tend to end up working for themselves, because then you've got all that control over everything. But what I'm realizing, it would have been really nice to have experience across different schemes and ways people work, or even work in a hospital, right? To go, when everything's out of my control, what does clinical work just look like? Like, so that's some of the things that I now, talking to different people, go, oh, that probably would have been cool. I probably would have hated it while I was there, but it actually would have been really helpful for me to know how to navigate systems a little bit better, or to have had that exposure to help me go, sometimes there are systems we cannot change, and I have to decide whether this space fits me or not. Well, this has been a lovely chat. We normally wrap this up with a little bit of a note to self. So let's go back to new grad Harry. What would be a little note to yourself when you're a new grad?
A note to self. I mean, really, like, seriously, the world is your oyster, and don't be afraid to explore lots of things more than just like you thought you were going to look at. And you know, you always had this idea about what it was going to look like, but just being open to who knows where it could take you. And you know, there's a reason why you picked it as something that has so many opportunities. Actually be open to explore them and see where it takes you.
Really amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Harry.
Thank you, Elise. Have a great day.
The OT Coaching Confidential podcast exists to support occupational therapists and allied health professionals to think clearly, feel less alone, and take meaningful steps forward in their work. If this conversation has resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on what stood out. What were your key takeaways? What might you apply in your own personal or professional practice? If you'd like to keep the conversation going, head on over to www.theotcoach.au. You'll find free resources, workshops, trainings, and practical tools to support you wherever you are in your career. And if you're interested in joining the OT Coach Academy, we currently have the Paediatric Hub for Paediatric OTs, the Sole Trader Hub for Sole Traders, and the Business Hub for business owners with a team. Please note that the information shared in this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to replace individualized professional advice. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. The OT Coach, where therapists come to grow.